Hello, I just wanted to show you something that I was going to plant today in the hedgerow. This is the native box, which is a sort of glossy glaucous green leaf plant. It's quite rare in the wild. Wild box is an amazing tree, very tall, shade tolerant, works really well in chalky soils. I'm going to use it in the hedgerow as an infill. I took these cuttings from a tree in an old garden a few years ago, about 3 years ago, and the thing that strikes you about it is it's very different to the box that we use in modern gardens. We've got much glossier leaves here, a much hardier little plant, but the thing that's really fascinating about it, and the reason I'm talking about this, is because it doesn't suffer from box blight, it doesn't suffer from box moth, the new problem that's really affecting gardens, and it doesn't seem to get box rust either. And this is really down to the fact that it's got massive genetic diversity. These would be seedling trees, they're old, they have lots of different genes in them, and they've got natural resistance to all the pathogens that are ravaging gardens now and making people really think about whether they can grow box anymore. And it got me thinking just how important it is to have genetic diversity in crops. This is the box that is used in gardens. It looks very similar. It's been selected for its ability to grow quickly from cuttings, grow into a big green, easy clippable plant. But what you need to realise is all of these Buxa sempervirens are pretty much identical. Most of them are the same clone. And in fact, the dwarf Dutch box has been grown since the 1600s, pretty much as the same clone. So what tends to happen is you've got an incredibly narrow gene pool there of material, which is selected for characteristics that you can see, but what you're not seeing is the ability to metabolize and cope with diseases, climate change, new pathogens coming along, new pests coming along, different things happening. So because we've narrowed down the gene pool, we've made that crop very vulnerable. And of course the answer, I think, is to use the wild box instead. And in fact, if you took cuttings from these plants and you used them in your garden, you'd eradicate the box moth. And I've seen that happen where people have got old hedges and they don't have any problems. But if you extend that out into agriculture and horticulture, you can see the problems are there as well, because what we've tended to do, particularly with us in the fruit industry, is narrow down the gene pool dramatically. And we've ended up using a very small number of fruits. For example, in apples, I think most of the commercial varieties only come from about a maximum of 9 different apples in the last 100 years, and many of them, almost all of them, have got some Cox genes in, Cox's orange pippin, which is an inherently weak apple, has lots of disease problems. And modern apples, for example, can't metabolize certain things which makes them very disease prone, whereas heritage apples have a much broader gene pool which gives them resistance to all kinds of things like scab and canker. And that's why they do so well. And an example you can find with apples where they're not getting sort of proof of, or they're not protecting themselves against disease, would be scab, because they're not able to metabolize things like arginine in their tissues. They can't get hold of cobalt, and therefore they can't metabolize and get rid of the problem, and they get scab because of that. Whereas the old heritage apples can grab things like cobalt more easily, and they can proof themselves against scab. So genetic diversity is where we really want to be.